Welcome to Nice and Blunt. This is week 13 fantasy football rankings. My name's Adam Riancho. Thank you for joining me. If you would like more of these rankings videos, please like and subscribe. And you probably don't want to share because this is info you want to keep to yourself. But if you want to share, I'd greatly appreciate it. And we're going to start off with running backs, and then we'll hit the wide receivers, and then we'll talk about quarterbacks and tight ends. So let's get into it. This week, my number one is Derrick Henry versus Cleveland. We saw what he did last week in just 3 quarters. Unfortunately, they took him off the field for the fourth, but he can easily get 150 to 200 yards and multiple touchdowns. He's the running back one in my running back rankings rest of season, and this week I have him there above Dalvin Cook, who comes in at number two. Dalvin Cook got injured for a little bit of time in this last game here against Carolina, but he did come back, and it doesn't seem to be a problem. So that shouldn't make you worried about Dalvin Cook. But there might be a few more touches for Alexander Madison just to keep him spry and healthy. So that's why I have Derrick Henry over Dalvin Cook, but they're basically the same. Number three is where it kind of gets interesting. Austin Ekeler jumps all the way to number three. Austin Ekeler, I don't really understand why he's not viewed that highly. In DraftKings, he's got a very low. I mean, in FanDuel, he's got a very low salary, so be sure to try to include him in your lineups. He has 20 touch volume, and this offense is moving every single drive with Justin Herbert under center. And maybe people still look at this running back core in the eyes of like Justin Jackson and Joshua Kelly, but when Austin Ekeler is healthy and on the field, it's electric. And give me the Chargers, Austin Ekeler, in my top three. Then I got Nick Chubb, my boy. Um, he's he has like 100-yard floor basically, and that doesn't really exist. It's very sparse in the NFL. And his talent's so elite, he's starting to get some routes out of the backfield, so he's taking some of Kareem Hunt's work. He's the clear number one on this team. He's their best player, and they're going to feed him every single game no matter what. He always has a big play waiting to happen, and we saw last week he popped off 25 points in half PPR leagues. So trust him, start him. I love Nick Chubb. Next, number five is Aaron Jones, and I feel a bit hesitant to even put him this high, to be honest with you. He saw basically a 55-45 touch split with Jamal Williams last week, and if that's what we can expect going forward, then it's hard to really keep Aaron Jones in the top five. He hasn't really had as many goal line looks lately, um, and that's kind of been his main selling point as a fantasy player. Those scores really boost his points. So if he's not getting as much work on the goal line that he should be, he's extremely efficient. Then you kind of have to temper expectations. That's why I've taken him out of my elite running back tier, and he's still at five. He's still very high, but I'm just not as high on Aaron Jones as I was in the first months of the season. Then we got Josh Jacobs. I feel like the Raiders have to bounce back after that poor, terrible performance in Atlanta. So they're playing the Jets. It's a great matchup for him, and I expect him to be given the ball early and often. As long as his ankle is fine, then he should have a great game. He comes in at number six for me. Then we got James Robinson. You got to trust the volume, and I have him over Alvin Kamara. I've got Alvin Kamara at 8, and you have to be scared. As long as Taysom Hill is the quarterback, it's not really looking good for his receptions. Alvin Kamara typically gets at least 5 catches per game, and he's only had 1 in the last 2 weeks. So those are really valuable points. He doesn't always get that many carries. Latavius Murray's been used a lot in the backfield too. So I'm obviously worried. I kind of want to put Alvin Kamara lower. He's been in the 25-30 range the last 2 weeks since Taysom Hill has taken over. So if you have him, you got to be sweating a little bit. But I still have him in the top 10. At some point, they have to remember what kind of team they are and who their best player is. So I think he'll bounce back this week and stay in the top 10. But 8 feels a little bit optimistic. Then to round out the top 10, I got Raheem Mostert and Antonio Gibson. The workload's there. The offenses are pretty good. And at least for Gibson, he gets all the goal line work. So those are really, really valuable points and touches, even though he's playing Pittsburgh, which is an elite rush defense. So I think those touchdowns are going to save you, but Antonio Gibson hesitantly stays in my top 10. Then I got DeAndre Swift at 11. He's going up against Chicago, which is typically a very bad matchup. However, Akeem Hicks has been out since pretty much the bye, and last week against Green Bay, their rush defense was not very good without him. So if he stays out, then DeAndre Swift should take back his workhorse role on all three downs, and he should have a pretty nice game now that he's back from the concussion protocol against Chicago. Then number 12, Wayne Gallman, one of the biggest risers of the last couple weeks. You can't pretend like he's not getting a massive workload in this offense. He got 27 touches last week for over 90 total yards and a touchdown. He's had 6 touchdowns in his last 5 games. So he's very reliable. Daniel Jones is not on the field, at least not expected to be this week. He has a hamstring injury. So there should be more touches for Gallman out of the backfield. However, they might not be as efficient given Colt McCoy is the backfield mate beside him, the quarterback. But I still really trust Wayne Gallman. I think he's a great play, and there aren't that many players getting his type of volume, so that's why he's in my top 12. Then I got David Montgomery versus Detroit. Great matchup like last week, but even if he breaks off a big play, it's hard for him to go over 100 yards in any game. It's hard for this offense to score. They're kind of unreliable, so he stays in that 13 to 15 range pretty much every week. Miles Sanders at Green Bay. It's very hard to trust Philadelphia in any capacity at this point, but the matchup's good for Miles Sanders. Green Bay's not great against the run, and at some point it's got to work out. His efficiency is great. His yards per carry are really high, but he's not catching passes, whether Carson Wentz can't get him the ball or he just drops him. So that's capping his upside quite a bit, but still 14. Then Chris Carson, Kareem Hunt, and Clyde Edwards-Helaire for the next 3. I was more high on each of them last week, except Clyde. I wasn't excited about Clyde last week. They're okay, but I feel like their roles have all diminished from their peak upside, so that's why they're in the 15 to 17 range. Then a few players who are kind of hard to rank. They could be much better or they could be worse. They're kind of unpredictable. Jonathan Taylor, Myles Gaskin, J.K. Dobbins, Kenyon Drake, and Melvin Gordon, 18 to 22. Pretty good matchups for all of them except Kenyon Drake going up against the Rams, but volume is there. Jonathan Taylor's going up against Houston, so it's a great matchup for him, but it's hard to trust Jonathan Taylor not to fumble and not to lose some touches there. So hopefully he keeps that job all to himself. If so, he'll definitely be in the top 20. 23, Duke Johnson, then James Conner and Zeke to round out the top 25. I don't feel good about any of them. Duke Johnson has a terrible matchup, but David Johnson's still not back and no Will Fuller, so he should get some passes, but I don't really love him this week in a tough matchup against Indianapolis. Then we got Damian Harris, number 26, Jamal Williams, and Nyheim Hines. Jamal Williams is probably the name that sticks out there because typically he's in the 35 to 40 range, but last week he got just as many touches as Aaron Jones. He's very efficient when he gets the work, and he's clearly a flex play. If anything happens to Aaron Jones, then he's a league winner, top 5 upside, but even with Aaron Jones on the field, they split this backfield pretty evenly, and if you're kind of desperate and you have Jamal Williams as a backup to Aaron Jones, I wouldn't be against playing him as a flex option given who else you have. He's pretty underrated. And then Nyheim Hines, a great matchup, but I feel a bit more solid about Jonathan Taylor. That's why he's at 28. And then Latavius Murray, who's also getting a lot of work for this New Orleans team now that Taysom Hill is a quarterback. The only reason he's so high is because Alvin Kamara scares me, and Murray's been a top 10 back the last 2 weeks, so you can't ignore that production, and that's why he moves in to the top 30 rankings. Lastly, in the top 30, Frank Gore. Michael Pirine is on IR, so Frank Gore has his backfield all to himself. And old reliable, he's producing, so he's a good floor play, but not much upside there. If you need 10 points, he'll probably give it to you. And just to point out a few names that stick out, the first Rams running back, all the way down at 37, Cam Akers and Darrell Henderson. Not exciting plays, even against Arizona. You just can't really trust this backfield. Philip Lindsay should be okay. I mean, 35, you can't get that excited, but he is a backup after all. And then, guys, you're obviously very much avoiding Zach Moss, Devin Singletary, outside my top 40, and everyone else is pretty much backups after this. So, last guy I want to mention, Todd Gurley is not expected to play, so I do have Ito Smith as the top New Orleans back, but Atlanta back, but they're playing New Orleans, so I'm not excited in the least bit. Ito Smith comes in at 34. Avoid Atlanta running backs this week. Avoid. I'll touch on wide receivers in a next video. So thank you for watching. These are just running back rankings. And why don't you slide over to my YouTube channel and check out the wide receiver video for more. Thank you. Make sure to hit that likes button, subscribe, and I hope to see you again.